This is The Right Stuff. I am author Robert Bone, and welcome to another indie book review. Today, I am going to be giving my thoughts on Rising Seas, Falling Skies by Edward Shafer. And I know it's been over a month. I think it's been about 2 months since my last review, so that's about the cadence where I thought it was probably going to land. Once a month might have been a little bit too ambitious. But anyways, I had the pleasure of meeting Ed at the fantasy convention that I went to a couple of months ago. He is a great guy. He and I talked for a little bit about a few things, and one thing that really impressed me about Ed is that he published this book a few years after retiring. I think it came out in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. And honestly, I think that's extremely commendable to take a stab at something like publishing at that stage of life. So definitely big props to Ed for taking that leap. I am genuinely impressed that he did that. So the book itself, it did have some problems, as first-time indie books do, as my own have. The story had good roots, and the concept was certainly enough to keep me reading. It follows a group of freedom fighters trying to make their way through a near-future post-apocalyptic setting. And I say almost because this world that Ed Shafer is describing is a consequence of modern-day topics or issues such as global warming, extremist groups, which I'll dive into a little bit more in a minute, a pandemic, and other issues driving modern culture narratives. Set around the greater Kansas City area, shout out, the story follows a handful of people who are caught between just trying to live their lives and fighting for their right to live against rampant tyrannical forces, trying to extinguish certain groups, or even just make their existence all the more difficult. Dust and high temperatures are a constant threat to anyone who steps outside, which is kind of a nice touch in providing a layer of richness to the world that Ed is building. Now, there are a few things going on in this book, and this is where some of the problems start to come in. The main villain of the story seems to be one of these aforementioned antagonistic groups of religious extremists who are intent on wiping out this main ragtag cast of people, trying to build a subsect of society where basically people can just live in peace amongst the tyranny. So there's this underlying plot of some of the main characters who are Pastor Zeke, Sheriff Blackwolf, and Brian Abernathy working toward building this community. But then there's another subplot of Abernathy's daughter, Valerie, smuggling vaccines to people that this tyrannical regime is trying to prevent from getting. So thirdly, we have also some kind of supernatural phenomenon playing out in the background as well that never really gets enough time in the spotlight to really invest the readers. If I remember right, I believe this is going to be a trilogy, so that's one of those things that could get expounded on as the books are released, but there's only a tiny bit of it in this book, and it kind of left me feeling unsatisfied. So it never quite feels like we get an overarching plot in this book that shines through and encompasses the rest of the events. One subplot never quite feels like it takes precedence over any of the others, even though the final third of the book largely focuses on Abernathy's daughter and her trying to avoid arrest while trying to save her girlfriend as well. But even that doesn't really kind of encompass the whole plot of this particular book. Even though the book never quite hones in on one thing to make the reader become invested, I will say that each of these focuses, each of these subplots, they are interesting in their own right. And I felt that Ed does a good job weaving all of those subplots together. And I can't talk about this book without going into some of the things and messages Ed is conveying here, because I think we're seeing this a lot in modern literature and media. I should state that an author including their own beliefs, their own leanings, and their own values that they champion isn't inherently a bad thing. The problem lies when an author has them take center stage and it becomes preachy while the story itself takes that back seat. While Rising Seas, Falling Skies doesn't have this throughout the story, and there are plenty of times where the story does get to shine, there are some times where modern day issues conveyed within this book are so loud that it really brings the story down. These religious extremists, the government, the pandemic clearly have real world counterparts, and they're so loud that it makes certain parts of the book extremely difficult to get through. Again, I'm not saying that those things obviously shouldn't be included, but I think there are better ways to incorporate them into the story without making the reader feel like they're being yelled at. Now, even though the main cast of characters falls into this kind of preachy subtext of the story, the characters themselves shine through perhaps most of all, and Ed does an amazing job actually making you care about them. These are people just trying to make it in life and be left alone, which I think most people actually can relate to. I know I can. And they have people that care about them. They face problems, and they have to overcome this constant looming threat of others who hate them and the government that hates them. They have feelings, they have goals, they play their part in the fight, and you find yourself cheering for them. I found myself actually not out loud, but I was like, oh, all right, they found success. That's great. And honestly, that's a very difficult thing to do. That's a very difficult emotion to evoke from your readers. And this is honestly where Ed's writing shines the most. So the book overall, it does need more polish. It needs shine quite a bit. At the beginning of this video, I said how it was commendable for Ed to write this book after having retired. And his first outing genuinely was a pretty good start. It's just there's things that needs work. And every indie book does, especially from an indie author's first stab at writing. Things like avoiding head hopping, maintaining clear POV prose, tight plot structure, and rich and clear scenes are some of the things that this book struggles with. But given everything that I've talked to Ed about, I really don't doubt that Ed's going to improve on those things in his next book, which he has announced. So, is this book a little rough? Yes. Is it a solid first attempt? Also yes. I think Ed has what it takes to become a great indie author, and honestly, I hope he continues to be open to improving his craft, because based on my own rather limited experience, I do see tons of potential, so I can see him getting pretty far. So, if you like reviews like this, please like the video, subscribe for more indie reviews, or indie book reviews rather. I'll have the link to Ed Shafer's book in the description below if you'd like to check it out for yourself, and stay tuned for another indie book review, hopefully within the next couple of months. All right, that's all I have time for now, and I will see you in the next one.